My name's Tom. I'm 37, and I've been married to Melissa for a little over 9 years now. No kids, but we've talked about them here and there over the years. Mostly, it's just been the two of us. We've built a life together that, to most people, probably looks pretty ordinary, but to me, it's been everything. Melissa and I met in the most random way you can imagine, a canceled flight. I was stuck at the Denver airport, irritated, hungry, and halfway through a lukewarm coffee when she sat down across from me at the gate with a sigh loud enough to get my attention. I made some dumb joke about airport food being a punishment for being late, and she actually laughed. That was the beginning. We ended up talking for hours. Both of us had missed connections, literally and maybe figuratively. She was on her way back from a conference in San Diego. I was returning from visiting my brother in Portland. That delay turned into drinks, which turned into dinner, which somehow turned into a 6-month long-distance relationship before we both realized we were in way too deep to keep pretending we weren't. Melissa was like no one I'd ever met before. She was bold, fiery, and sharp-witted. The kind of woman who'd plan a weekend hike and then forget the map, but somehow convince you it was an adventure. I'm more the spreadsheet and calendar type, but she always brought something out of me that I didn't know was there. We balanced each other out. We moved in together about a year after we started dating. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony at her grandmother's house in Vermont. It was intimate, candlelit, and exactly what we wanted. No fuss, just real. Now, we live in a quiet neighborhood outside Chicago. A cozy 2-bedroom place with a fenced-in backyard and just enough space to feel like we're not on top of each other. Melissa works in event planning. Always on the go, always with 3 phones ringing. I work from home doing IT support for a logistics firm. Most days are a mix of work, errands, and evenings with takeout and a Netflix series we start but never finish. Weekends are our time. We do brunch on Sundays at this little cafe down the block, where she always gets the avocado toast and complains about the price. We take long walks when the weather's good, usually ending up at the park or a bookstore. It's a rhythm we've fallen into, one that's always felt familiar and safe. I think what I've loved most about being married to Melissa is how much she fills a room. She's got this energy, this ability to make you feel like something exciting is about to happen. And even when it doesn't, she makes the ordinary feel like enough. That's the foundation we've built over the last decade. Or at least, that's what I've always believed. If you asked me to describe our marriage in one word, I'd probably say steady. And I mean that in the best way possible. Melissa and I have never been the overly romantic, heart-on-our-sleeves kind of couple. We're not the ones who post anniversary shout-outs on Instagram or go all out on Valentine's Day. That's never really been us. Our love has always been more lived in. Quiet. It's in the little things, the way she leaves the light on for me when I'm up late working, or how I bring her coffee just the way she likes it. Hazelnut creamer, 2 sugars, exactly 30 seconds in the microwave if it's gone cold. I know her routines better than I know my own. She's a morning person. I'm not. She wakes up early, like clockwork, usually humming some random tune while she gets ready for work. I've joked for years that she's been secretly auditioning for a toothpaste commercial every morning. Meanwhile, I need at least 2 alarms and a full cup of coffee before I can form coherent sentences. We've always respected each other's space. It's one of those things you learn the longer you're with someone. When to talk, when to listen, when to give a little distance. Melissa needs her space when she's stressed, usually during event season at work when her calendar's a mess of back-to-back galas, conferences, and corporate functions. I give her that space. I let her vent when she needs to, even if I don't have a clue what table placement drama means. And when I'm swamped with work deadlines or troubleshooting a mess of broken code, she knows to leave me alone until I come back to life. We've had our share of disagreements, sure. Every couple does. But nothing major. The kind of fights that blow over after a walk or a night of sleeping it off. We're not the yelling type. Our version of arguing is more like passive-aggressive silence until one of us caves and says, "So, are we okay?" We always end up okay. Our home is comfortable. That's the word I'd use. Not flashy, but warm. Lived in. Photos from our Vermont wedding in the hallway. A collection of mismatched mugs in the kitchen that she refuses to throw away because they have character. Plants in every window that she somehow keeps alive. I joke that our house is part jungle, part museum of inside jokes. And I like it that way. We spend most Friday nights at home. Melissa will pour herself a glass of wine. I'll crack open a beer, and we'll order in. Usually Thai food or pizza from that place down the street that always gets our order wrong, but somehow redeems itself with their garlic knots. We'll watch a show, maybe play a game of Scrabble, which she almost always wins, and fall asleep on the couch. It's not glamorous, but it's ours. I remember thinking, not too long ago, that we had finally hit that point in life where things just work. The hard years felt behind us. We were talking about possibly traveling more, just the two of us. She'd mentioned going to Europe, maybe with her friends first, then just us. I didn't mind. She deserved it. She works hard, and I trusted her completely. That was our life. At least, that's the version I held close. I've always thought there's something sacred in the routines we share with someone. The small, often unnoticed rituals that make a life together feel full. I think that's why I held on to ours so tightly, because for a long time, they felt like proof that we were good, that we were strong. Melissa and I had fallen into these rhythms that I genuinely looked forward to. Saturday mornings, for example, were always reserved for our no plans, no pressure rule. We'd sleep in, or at least I would. She'd usually be up reading in the kitchen with a blanket wrapped around her like some kind of caffeine-seeking burrito. I'd wander in half awake, and she'd already have music playing on her phone, usually something old and jazzy, something with warmth in it. We'd just exist together. No rush. Sometimes we'd go out for brunch. Sometimes we'd clean the house while dancing like idiots to whatever playlist she'd put on. Sometimes we'd just stay in pajamas all day, doing absolutely nothing. And those were some of the best days. Melissa is one of those people who somehow finds a way to make everything feel a little more alive. A new candle scent turns into a whole cozy night in theme. A recipe from TikTok becomes a full-blown kitchen experiment. Even grocery shopping turns into a mini date if she's in a good mood. She'll sneak snacks into the cart when she thinks I'm not looking. I pretend not to notice, just to see her grin when I unpack them later. We weren't flashy, but we weren't dull either. We had inside jokes going back nearly a decade. We had traditions, like watching Love Actually every December, even though I complain about it every year, and she knows I secretly enjoy it. Or our anniversary hikes, every year, no matter the weather. Just the two of us and whatever trail we hadn't conquered yet. Looking back, there were definitely shifts. But I think when you're in it, day after day, you stop noticing the subtle changes. Or maybe you choose not to. You explain them away as life evolving, schedules getting hectic, people growing. And that's the thing. We weren't perfect, but I never expected perfect. I just expected honesty, effort, and some version of the truth when things got hard. I remember one night not long ago, we were sitting on the porch after dinner. It was early spring, still cold enough for jackets, but the sky was clear and stars were out. She leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "I don't know what I'd do without you." It stayed with me. Not just the words, but the way she said it. Soft, like it was true. Like she really meant it. I think that's why what came next hit me the way it did. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That was us. Before. It was a Wednesday night. One of those slow, quiet evenings where dinner was simple, the air was still, and the hum of the dishwasher was the only background noise. I was sitting at the kitchen table sorting through emails on my laptop when Melissa came in with that look on her face. Half playful, half strategic. She poured herself a glass of white wine, leaned against the counter, and just watched me for a moment. Then she said, "So, I've been thinking." Now, every married person knows that when your spouse starts a sentence like that, it can go a lot of ways. I closed the laptop, gave her my full attention, and said, "All right, hit me." She took a sip, then walked over and sat across from me. "Jess is planning a trip," she started. "Kind of a girls' getaway thing. A week. Somewhere warm. Probably Mexico, or maybe Portugal. Just us. Me, Jess, Lauren, and Rachel." I waited for more. She kept going. "It wouldn't be for another month, but we've been talking about it for weeks. I think I need it. We've all been running on fumes, and I haven't taken real time off in forever." She didn't say it like she was asking permission, but I know her well enough to know when she wants me to say yes before she even finishes the sentence. I nodded slowly. Sounds like a good reset. Her face relaxed a little. "I'll still need to run it by my boss," she added quickly, "but I think she'll be cool with it." We'd split an Airbnb, nothing crazy. Just beach, wine, girl talk. Maybe some hiking. I smiled. "Sounds like a good plan." She tilted her head, gave me that cautious grin. "There's just one thing." "Ah, there it is." The flights are kind of steep, she said. And I told Jess I'd book by Friday to lock in a decent price. Do you think you could help me out with some of it? Just for the flight, and maybe a bit of spending money. I didn't hesitate. I never do with her. Yeah, of course, I said. How much are we talking? She gave me a number. Nothing absurd, but not pocket change either. I made a mental note to move some money around from savings the next day. She looked genuinely grateful. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're the best, she said. I shrugged it off, but it felt good to hear. It always does, doesn't it? When someone you love is happy, and you know you helped make that happen. After that, she was in an unusually bubbly mood, humming while she cleaned up, sending group texts to her friends, and giggling at their replies. She even came to sit next to me on the couch and rested her legs on my lap, scrolling through pictures of tropical beaches and little villas with infinity pools. She asked my opinion about which place looked better. I pointed at one, but she wasn't really listening. That night, after she fell asleep, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. I couldn't say why, but something in me felt just a little unsettled. Not in a dramatic way. Nothing that screamed wrong. Just distant. Like a slight shift in gravity. I told myself I was just overthinking it. That she deserved this trip. That we all need breaks sometimes. I transferred the money the next morning. Melissa's energy changed the week leading up to the trip. Not in a way that screamed something was wrong. More like a subtle rewiring. Her focus shifted. She was present, technically, but her attention seemed tethered elsewhere. It was like living next to someone instead of with them. I noticed it most in the way she started preparing for the trip. She became obsessed with every detail. Her outfits, her hair appointments, waxing, nails, new swimsuits. It was normal, sure, but something about the level of effort felt heightened. Like she was getting ready for something more than just sandy beaches and mimosas with her friends. The night before she left, she was packing in the guest room with the door closed. I knocked once and asked if she needed help, but she said she was FaceTiming Jess and trying on outfits. Her tone wasn't cold, but it was brisk, almost like I was intruding. So I gave her space. Later, I walked past the room on my way to bed and overheard her say, "Okay, I'll see you there," followed by a laugh. Not the polite kind, but the genuine kind that makes your stomach flip when you hear it. Then silence. I stood there for a second, waiting to hear one of her friends' voices, but none came. The next morning, I offered to drive her to the airport. She turned me down. "Jess is swinging by," she said while sipping her coffee, already dressed in travel clothes. "She's got room for everyone's luggage." She kissed me quickly, cheek, not lips, and thanked me again for being so cool about all this. That phrasing stuck with me, like it was something I was doing for her, not just a regular part of being a supportive husband. She wheeled her suitcase to the door, smiled like nothing was out of the ordinary, and left. And just like that, the house felt quieter. Not peaceful, empty. I spent the first day catching up on work. By the second, I started missing her in the kind of way you miss someone who's slowly been slipping away for a while. I texted her that night. "Hope you're having fun. What VE you guys been up to?" No reply until just before midnight. "Sorry babe, super busy day? Boat tour, dinner, lots of drinks. Miss you." Short, polished, like it had been copied and pasted. I went to her Instagram out of habit. Nothing new on her profile, but there were stories, most from her friends. Drinks clinking, waves crashing, girls dancing by a fire pit. Then one clip caught my eye, a dinner table. Laughter, movement. Melissa was there, barely visible, seated next to a guy I didn't recognize, tan, athletic, his arm resting casually on the back of her chair. I watched that story on loop until it expired. No one tagged him. No one mentioned him. I didn't say anything. Not then. But something inside me shifted. It wasn't that I thought she was cheating, not yet. It was the way she suddenly felt unreachable. Like I was watching someone I knew from a distance and realizing she wasn't waving back. The house felt different without her. Not just empty, but off. The kind of quiet that doesn't settle around you, but presses in. I tried to keep myself busy with work, errands, and whatever distractions I could find, but the stillness kept creeping in around the edges. The first few days of her trip, Melissa sent me the usual check-ins, brief, cheerful texts about what she and the girls were doing. She mentioned cocktails by the beach, a catamaran ride, some hiking. Her tone was upbeat, a little too polished maybe, but I didn't think much of it at the time. She was on vacation. She was supposed to be relaxed and having fun. Still, Something about the way she phrased things felt generic. Like she was narrating a travel brochure instead of actually living it. I'd ask questions about her day, like I always do, what she ate, what she saw, who she was with, but her replies didn't always line up. She dodged the details, giving one-sentence answers that made it harder to picture what was really going on. It was subtle, but the Melissa I knew had never been vague. She used to tell stories like she was unpacking the whole day, step by step, color by color. Now, everything felt like it was being smoothed over before it reached me. Then her location disappeared. We had location sharing turned on for years. Not out of control or suspicion. It just helped when one of us was traveling, or trying to meet up, or working late. But when I checked it that afternoon, almost out of habit more than anything, her phone showed up as location not available. At first, I assumed it was just bad signal. She was abroad, maybe in a remote area, and these things happen. But it stayed off for hours. I checked again before bed. Same result. The next morning, it was still off. I sent her a text around 10 a.m., just something casual, asking how she slept, if they had anything fun planned for the day. No reply. Around 1 p.m., I called her. It rang until voicemail. I tried again 2 hours later. Nothing. Not even a missed call notification. By evening, I was pacing the living room, phone in hand, trying to shake off the anxiety that had settled in my chest. She'd never gone this long without at least responding. Not once in all our years together. She finally texted back after 8 p.m. She said they'd gone on a yoga hike that morning and then ended up spending the day at a little spa in a nearby town. According to her, the signal was weak, and she hadn't realized her phone was still on airplane mode until later. She said she missed me and hoped I'd had a relaxing day too. There was nothing overtly wrong with the message. In fact, it was perfectly reasonable. If I hadn't already been on edge, I probably would have read it and moved on. But this time, it felt like something had been prepped. Rehearsed. Like it had gone through a filter before it reached me. I stared at her message for a long time. I didn't reply immediately. I just sat with the feeling that something wasn't right. I didn't have proof. I didn't have anything concrete to hold up as a red flag. But sometimes the absence of something consistency, warmth, effort, says more than any single thing could. That night, I lay in bed, phone resting on my chest, the screen still lit with her message. I read it over and over, looking for the version of her that used to text me without thinking. That version wasn't in there. And I think that's when I realized I wasn't just missing my wife. I was starting to lose her. By the 6th day of Melissa's trip, I stopped trying to convince myself that everything was fine. I kept going through the motions, work, laundry, making dinner. I didn't bother to plate properly, but everything felt half-hearted. I wasn't functioning. I was floating in this weird limbo where every hour felt like waiting for something, even though I couldn't name what. The silence between her texts had grown wider. She'd reply when she felt like it, never unkind but always a little too careful, like someone managing a situation rather than sharing their day. I kept looking at the way she phrased things. Words that used to be soft and familiar had turned into something polished, safe, emotionally sterile. Melissa was still saying all the right things, that she missed me, that she couldn't wait to be home, but none of it sounded like her anymore. Not really. She sent a photo one evening of a beach at sunset. No people in it. No signs of where she was exactly. Just golden light and water and sand. No caption. Not even a "wish you were here." I stared at it longer than I should have, trying to imagine her behind the lens. Was she smiling when she took it? Was someone standing beside her? I didn't ask. I kept thinking about her location being off. It wasn't a technical glitch, that much I knew. It was a choice. And the kind of choice that made my stomach knot in ways I didn't want to acknowledge yet. One night, I sat down at my desk and did something I'm not proud of. I opened her laptop. We don't keep secrets about devices. We've always known each other's passwords, not out of surveillance but convenience. Melissa was never one to hide anything, not in the years we'd been together. But that night, I needed to see something, anything, that made me feel grounded. I didn't even know what I was looking for. There wasn't much. A few recent browser tabs, local restaurants in the area she'd mentioned, weather forecasts, spa listings. It all looked harmless. But it also looked staged. As if she'd been careful to leave a trail just clean enough. I closed it without digging further. Not because I didn't want to know the truth, because I didn't want to find it this way. If something was happening, I needed to hear it from her mouth, not through digital breadcrumbs. But it's strange what you start noticing when your mind is spinning. I realized she hadn't once asked about how things were going here. Not once. No, how was your day? or how's work been. Not even a question about our dog, who she usually spoils like a child. Her messages were one-way broadcasts, short bursts from another world she was living in, with no space for me in it. And there was something else. Rachel and Jess, the two friends she said she was traveling with, had both gone quiet online. They were usually the type to post constantly, especially during trips. But now? Nothing. Their stories had dried up. Their tags stopped including Melissa. I checked more than I want to admit. And when I did, it felt like I was chasing shadows. I didn't want to say it out loud, not even in my own head, but I was starting to feel like the entire trip had turned into something I wasn't supposed to understand. That night, I went to bed and stared at the ceiling again, wondering what version of my wife would walk through the door when she returned. If it would even feel like her. I didn't sleep much. Just waited. The truth didn't come from Melissa. It came from Rachel. I was sitting on the couch, half watching some documentary with the sound low, phone in hand, refreshing Melissa's messages like I had been for days. She hadn't responded to my last text from that morning. Something about the way I worded it, "Are you okay?" must have been too pointed, too direct, because it got nothing back. Then, around 9:15 p.m., my phone rang. It was an unknown number, local area code. I don't normally answer those, but something told me to pick it up. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was the way my heart started pounding before I even touched the screen. Hello? There was a pause. Then a shaky voice. Tom? It's Rachel. It took me a second to register. Rachel, one of Melissa's closest friends. One of the women she was supposedly on this girl's trip with. Hey, is everything all right? I asked. Another pause. I wasn't going to say anything, she said, her voice low, almost whispering. But I can't sit with this anymore. I sat up straighter. What's going on? I'm not in Mexico, she said. Neither is Jess. That silence, the kind that settles like a brick in your chest, came down hard. What? I asked, barely getting the word out. We were supposed to go, she continued. Back when Melissa first mentioned the trip, it was going to be the three of us. But then Jess had a family emergency, and I backed out a week before because of work. Melissa said she'd still go, that she needed the time. I assumed she went alone. But tonight I saw something. I didn't say a word. I just waited. She posted something to her private story, Rachel went on. Not her main account. Just one of those short clips. I don't even think she realized I was still in the list. It was her and some guy. Not a friend. Definitely not just a friend. I swallowed hard. My mouth had gone dry. They were at dinner, Rachel said. Laughing. He had his hand on her thigh. She leaned in. I don't know, Tom. I thought you should know. The line stayed quiet for a while. I think Rachel expected me to scream or cry or collapse. But I didn't. I just sat there. Frozen. Do you know his name? I asked. No, she replied. I've never seen him before. But the way she looked at him. I'm sorry. I thanked her, my voice barely recognizable. She apologized again, then hung up. The house was dead silent after that. The TV still flickered in the background, but I wasn't watching anymore. I just stared at my phone, like maybe she'd text, maybe she'd come clean, maybe some part of this could be explained away. But she didn't. Of course she didn't. I sat there for an hour, not moving. My hands kept shaking, my chest tight. It wasn't just betrayal, it was the method of it. The planning, the lies, the ease with which she slipped into this double life while I sat back home believing every word. And then something inside me cracked open. Not the part that loved her. The part that trusted her. And once that's gone, you can't patch it back together. I stood up, walked to the bedroom, opened the closet. I started gathering her things, not throwing them, not trashing anything, just stacking, folding, removing. Like I was making space for the truth to breathe. Then I grabbed a pen and paper. And I started writing. Melissa came back on a Sunday. I knew exactly when her flight would land because I still had the original itinerary saved in my inbox, the one she forwarded me weeks ago when this trip was just a well-deserved break with the girls. She hadn't sent any updates since the call from Rachel. Not a text. Not a photo. Not even a lazy made it home safe. And I didn't reach out either. I didn't ask where she was or who she was with. I let the silence grow into something final. The day before she returned, I packed everything. I boxed up the remnants of a shared life, her clothes, her shoes, her half of the bathroom drawer, the book she kept on the nightstand that I'd never seen or read but somehow always stayed there. I moved them all into the guest room, lined the boxes neatly against the wall, and closed the door. I emptied our joint bank account that morning. Not out of spite, but strategy. I'd always been the one who managed our finances, bills, budgeting, savings. The car title was in my name, the lease was under my credit. I didn't need to ask permission. I just transferred everything we had into a private account I'd opened 2 days earlier. I printed out the bank statement and tucked it into the envelope with the rest of what I'd prepared. The video was the final piece. I'd recorded it that night, the one after Rachel called, using the home security camera from the guest bedroom. I brought someone over. Not random, not impulsive. Someone Melissa knew well. Someone she would never have expected. It wasn't about the act itself. I didn't feel proud, exactly. But I felt clear. Sharp, like I'd stepped out of some fog I hadn't realized I'd been walking through for years. The betrayal had hollowed something out in me, and that night filled it with something new, decisiveness. A controlled burn. When Sunday came, I didn't wait for her. I left before sunrise. I put the envelope on the dining table, right where she'd see it the moment she walked in. Inside was a note, short and direct, handwritten. I know. I saw everything. The money's gone. The car's mine. We're done. Underneath the note was a flash drive. On it, the video. Just under 3 minutes. Silent, unflinching, undeniable. I didn't include any threats. I didn't need to. The message was loud enough without yelling. I left the key to the house next to the envelope and walked out with my duffel bag. My brother was waiting in the car. I didn't tell him much, just that I needed space, and he didn't press. He'd always been better with presence than with words. When I imagine her walking in, I don't think about the shock. I think about the pause, the moment between seeing the note and realizing what's in the video. The way her stomach must have dropped. The way her chest must have tightened as everything she thought she was hiding blew open in seconds. Maybe she cried. Maybe she screamed. Maybe she didn't feel anything at all. I'll never know, and I'm not sure I want to. What I do know is that when she looked around that house, there was no trace of the man she'd left behind. Just the truth. And the cost. She started calling within an hour. At first, I just let the phone ring. Then I muted it. By the 5th call, I turned it off completely and tossed it on the nightstand at my brother's place. I didn't want to hear her voice. Not now. Not when every syllable would be laced with the kind of panic that only sets in after the damage is already done. Later that night, I turned it back on and was met with a flood of messages. Dozens of them. Some were desperate. Some angry. Most were some version of, "We need to talk." Like words were the only thing standing between her and the life she'd just watched collapse in front of her. One message stood out. It simply read, "Please." It wasn't what you think. But it was. It was exactly what I thought. And then came the one that made my hands shake. Why would you do that with her? So she watched the video? Good. I wanted that image seared into her memory, the same way the image of her with that man had burned itself into mine the second Rachel said it out loud. She tried calling again the next morning, and when I didn't answer, she left a voicemail. Her voice sounded smaller. Strained. She said she was sorry. That she messed up, that she had no excuses, but that she still loved me. I listened to the whole thing once, then deleted it. It didn't take long before she reached out to my brother. Then my parents. I'd already warned them. I told them that Melissa and I were done, and that I wasn't open to talking about it, at least not yet. I asked for space, and they respected that. My brother ignored her messages. My mom blocked her. Even my dad, who's always been the most forgiving man I know, told her she had no place in our lives anymore. That part hurt more than I expected. Not because they rejected her, but because it made it real. On the 3rd day, she showed up at my brother's door. I wasn't there. She rang the bell twice. Then again. My brother answered through the intercom and told her to leave. I'm told she cried. Stood on the porch for a few minutes before walking away. That night, she texted again. Just one line this time. "If you don't talk to me, I'll tell your family everything." I stared at that one longer than the others. It was pure Melissa trying to claw back power with threats, as if the truth was some hidden weapon she could still control. So I responded, finally. For the first time since she got back. "Try it, and I'll send the video to yours." That was it. She didn't reply. She didn't call again. And that's when I knew it was over for good. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was a full, final ending. A door slamming shut, not with rage, but with clarity. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need a breakdown, or a confession, or some teary-eyed speech. I just needed distance. And now I had it. It's been a month. She hasn't contacted me again. Not directly, not through anyone. Just silence. And honestly, that's the only form of respect she's shown me throughout this entire thing, finally leaving me alone. I've moved out of my brother's place and into a short-term rental on the other side of the city. It's small. 2 rooms, creaky floors, bare walls. But for now, it's mine. No echoes of a shared life. No ghost of her perfume in the bedroom. No photos of vacations we took. No coffee mugs with initials on them. Just space. And quiet. The day I signed the lease, I sat on the floor of the empty living room for an hour with a cheap beer in one hand and a single key in the other. That moment hit me harder than anything else. Not the video. Not the discovery. Not even the revenge. It was that moment, just me, alone with nothing, that made it real. I had lost something I thought was permanent. And I hadn't even noticed it slipping until it was already gone. I don't miss her. I miss the version of her I built in my head. The one I thought I married. The woman who used to wake me up by kissing the back of my neck and whispering, "Hey, come back to bed." The one who laughed uncontrollably at bad TV and sang along to every road trip playlist. That version of her hasn't existed for a long time. Maybe she never did. I started going to the gym again. Not because I'm chasing some post-divorce glow-up, but because I needed to get out of my own head. I needed to sweat. To move. To feel something that wasn't betrayal. I talked to my brother more. We've been watching terrible action movies on weekends and making fun of them like we're 15 again. My parents check in too, not with pity, but with quiet reassurance. They know I don't want to talk about it. And they don't push. I've picked up journaling. Not for anyone else, just for me. Getting the thoughts out, even the ugly ones, helps more than I expected. I even made a rule, no writing about her past 10 p.m. That's when the memories tend to get louder, and I've learned not to feed them. Some days are harder than others. Some mornings, I still wake up and reach across the bed before I remember it's empty. But then I get up. I make coffee. I go for a walk. I answer emails. I take deep breaths when the anger shows up. I don't fight it anymore. I let it pass. I'm learning that healing isn't some big, dramatic turning point. It's just doing small things right, over and over, until they stop hurting. I haven't started dating again. I'm not ready. I don't even know what I'd say to someone new. What do you tell someone when they ask what you've been through? My wife lied to me, slept with someone else while pretending to find herself, and I found out from a friend who couldn't stomach the silence anymore. It's not exactly first date material, but I'm not bitter. Not anymore. I'm just done. Done with guessing. Done with pretending. Done with carrying a future that was never mine to begin with. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like freedom.